Imagine this. You're deep underwater, surrounded by darkness. Nothing but the sound of your own breath and the weight of the ocean pressing in on you. You're descending into a cavernous abyss, and you know that every moment spent below could be your last. But then, something strange happens. Your mind starts to betray you. You begin to see things that aren't there, hear things that don't exist. Your body starts to shake uncontrollably. Fear creeps in, but you push it aside. After all, you're a professional. You've trained for this. But deep down, you know there's a limit to what even the best can handle. This is the reality faced by two fearless divers, Sheck Exley and Jim Bowden, as they take on one of the most dangerous dive sites known to man, the Zacaton sinkhole. What happens next is more terrifying than any of them could have ever anticipated. Stick with me, because the dive into the abyss is just the beginning. This is a tale of grit, danger, and unimaginable horror. And I promise you, the most intense part of this story comes when you think it couldn't get any worse. Before we dive into the full story, make sure to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more spine-chilling real-life adventures. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Sheck Exley was a man who lived for the thrill of the dive. He wasn't just a diver, he was a pioneer, a legend in the world of cave diving. Born in Live Oak, Florida, Sheck began diving at the age of 16 and soon became obsessed. In fact, he was so dedicated to his craft that he would often push past limits that others deemed impossible. With over 4,000 cave dives under his belt, Sheck wasn't just part of the diving world, he was shaping it. He was one of the first to dive over 800 feet below the surface, a feat that only a select few had achieved by 2021. He helped revolutionize the equipment and safety protocols that are standard today, ensuring the survival of countless divers who followed in his wake. But Sheck wasn't alone in this dangerous obsession. He had a partner, Jim Bowden, a 54-year-old Texan who shared Sheck's passion for exploring the deep. Jim had dedicated his life to diving, spending every penny he earned on new gear and equipment to explore the vast underwater caves of Central America and Mexico. For Jim, diving wasn't just a hobby, it was his life's work. Together, Sheck and Jim stumbled upon one of the most treacherous dive sites they would ever encounter, the Zacaton sinkhole in Mexico, one of the deepest cenotes in the world. Zacaton had been a legend among divers for years, but no one had ever attempted to dive to the very bottom. At its deepest point, the sinkhole reaches nearly 1,100 feet. To give you an idea of how deep that is, imagine plunging into the unknown, where the pressure of the water could crush a human body in an instant. Sheck and Jim didn't hesitate for a second. Without speaking a word to each other, they knew what they had to do. They were going to dive Zacaton. But before they could even think about the dive, they had to contend with the immense dangers that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Sheck was facing a different kind of battle. As he descended past 700 feet, his vision began to distort. He saw concentric circles, shimmering in the darkness. His body itched, a sensation that soon morphed into a burning pain. He knew immediately what it was: high-pressure nervous syndrome. His mind was fighting him. But there was no turning back now. Despite the pain, Sheck pressed on, reaching 860 feet. This was uncharted territory. No diver had ever been here before. The landscape around him was eerie, flat, with small rocks scattered across the bottom, covered by a thick layer of black sediment. He was standing in a place where no human had ever stood, but the cost of being there was high. Every second spent at that depth would later be paid for with hours of decompression. But he didn't care. This was what he lived for. As he started to ascend, the pressure began to lift, and the symptoms of HPNS slowly faded. But there was no time to relax. Sheck knew that the true danger wasn't just in the depths. It was in the long ascent that awaited him. But as Sheck made his way up, Jim was facing his own nightmare. At 920 feet, Jim's air supply was running dangerously low. He'd consumed far more air than he had planned, and his regulators were starting to fail. In a desperate attempt to keep from descending further, he inflated his buoyancy control device, but it wasn't enough. At 450 feet, he switched to his backup air tank, only to have the regulator break off violently. Panic set in. Time was running out. Jim was on the edge of disaster. By the time Jim reached the next air tank, Sheck was nowhere to be found. His bubbles had disappeared. Back on the surface, the support team had noticed the same thing. Sheck's bubbles had vanished long before Jim's reappeared. No one had seen Sheck come up. And then, when Jim surfaced, he asked the question that no one wanted to hear. Did Sheck make it back? Kristovich's answer was grim. No bubbles. No movement. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Sheck Exley, the legend, was gone. The man who had defied every boundary known to diving was lost to the abyss. What happened to Sheck that day remains a mystery, one that continues to haunt the diving community. If you found this story as gripping and terrifying as I did, don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more real-life stories that are just as chilling. What do you think happened to Sheck? Drop your theories in the comments below. And as always, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop exploring.